Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our 30-minute session today talking about MDF, hard labor or labor of love. We're going to discuss some of the latest trends that we're seeing in the market, and especially as it relates to MDF in general. My name is Anne Strandberg. I'm the head of strategic partnership here at Real Access. I have several years of experience in the IT industry, and before Real Access, I ran the marketing department for including a lot of the MDF supported business for one of the leading system integrator here in San Diego. Before that, I was deep into cybersecurity and partner marketing. I have Chris Lee, president of Real Access, with me here today. Chris, do you want to do a little short intro?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending. Again, my name's Chris Lee. I'm out here in San Diego also. Previously worked in IT distribution, worked at SaaS companies, and then was at an MSP for a number of years. And then I'll go back and date myself and start, working in the business of selling bonded T1s and voice over IP lines. So super excited to give you guys some input on stuff that we're seeing in the market today.
Awesome. Thank you. So like I mentioned, our goal is to do this in 30 minutes. We have about 15 minutes towards the end for Q&A. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to use the chat or the question box, and we'll address them as we get to the Q&A part. All right. So these are the top trend topics that we're currently seeing in the market. And like I mentioned, as it relates to marketing, but especially also MDF, we're going to dive into each and one of them throughout the presentation. And I also want to mention that these are not just trends that we're seeing, we're actually working with these trends here at Real Access. We always keep them in mind when we implement projects and programs, and they're super helpful. There are a lot of opportunities here, and not only for 2022, but we're anticipating this to continue on into 2023.
Yeah, so we had a little bet. I guess you guys can see from this picture, Anne is pregnant. I had a bet that we actually wouldn't make it to today because she's due next week. But hopefully you found this was her idea to wrap this whole thing around being 9 months pregnant. So it was a lot of fun creating this.
We had a lot of fun creating this, and yeah, let's hope we're not going into labor today, but it's very close. It's very close, as you can see in this picture. All right, trend number one: in-person events and virtual events are on the rise. So this is a topic in general that I have a lot of experience with, especially from my previous role. So when I ran the marketing department at a previous company, we relied heavily on field events, online events. We did a lot of them to drive a business and top of funnel leads. But back then, we were very focused on the sales team sending out emails to recruit. And the one thing that we're focused on was the attendees. That was our proof of performance. That was the only ROI measured. But what we're seeing today is actually that the successful events, that's no longer enough. You actually need a more advanced marketing strategy and use multiple marketing approaches to engage your target market. Chris, any thoughts on this? You want to jump in some opportunities?
Yeah, so the most successful people doing this right now, that obviously events came back in full force. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. The ones that are being very successful, the biggest thing is that instead of using Eventbrite or Evite as the registration pages, they're using their website as their registration page, and they're driving all the traffic to their website. And then that way, now they've got tracking capability on their recruitment efforts, and they're sharing those recruitment efforts with the vendor to show that the ROI in the campaign is not solely driven on the number of attendees. It really is in the whole process of this campaign. So if you have hundreds and hundreds of people that are visiting the landing page, but they're not signing up, that doesn't mean they're not interested. That probably means that they're an introvert and just don't like to do these social events. And then they're using that traffic to retarget using Facebook retargeting or Google display retargeting to try to drive them back into a conversion in a different way. So what ends up happening here is that the ROI is actually being driven at the recruitment side, and the event is just used as a way to pull people over the finish line. So as you could see, is if you constantly doing this, you're doing an event every quarter, event every month, all that web traffic leverages on top of itself, and it starts to produce some ROI for you, and ultimately will make recruiting for events much easier in the future.
Yeah, and just to mention, so the key point here also to remember is it's not necessarily who's attending, it's everything that's captured along the way. So a good example is the webinar we're doing today. It's not just the people. We love seeing all the attendees on the webinar here now, but it's a lot more that goes into who we actually sent this invitation to, who showed up to or visited the landing page, and what we do with all of that data now after the fact that we posted this. Okay, trend number 2, short form videos are reaching new heights. So short form videos, we initially talked about making this a content is king, but videos, it is content. And we're seeing, I'm sure you've all seen this, it is everywhere right now, and it's a low time investment for production. Short form videos, you can align with multiple social media platforms. So we're seeing that these videos, they're the most likely to get engagement once you post them. And according to HubSpot, it's also giving you the highest ROI of any other social media marketing strategy out there. So there's an opportunity for you here, even for B2B space, that they're inexpensive to produce, they require minimal resources, and it is an easy way to communicate your differentiators quickly. And again, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about like TikTok or those, but they're everywhere. It's not just a TikTok short form video we're talking about. You can leverage this on all platforms to get your message out.
Yeah, the short form videos obviously have grown significantly over the last year. TikTok being a major contributor to that. I mean, I don't. Generally speaking, TikTok isn't ready for what we do, this kind of high-tech B2B market. It's there though, and I would say it's going to be there pretty quickly. But when you are creating these short-form videos, it's literally just getting on your cell phone, recording whatever's on top of your mind, making sure that you're providing a lot of educational value in that video, and then doing that a few times, and you could add like kind of a bumper to the front of it to make it look better. But when you do go to release it, let's say you're going to release it on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, do not just upload it to YouTube and share the link. You want to upload it to each individual platform, specifically on LinkedIn too, because LinkedIn wants you to host your video on their platform, and you'll see over time that your followers will actually get a higher engagement using those videos. And I think what we all kind of thought was the path of least resistance was put it on YouTube and then just share the link. That has proven not to produce the same type of result if you load them into each individual platform.
It does require a little bit more time, but I've seen that a lot, posting things myself on LinkedIn, sharing versus uploading on your own. You immediately get way more views and engagement when you do it that way. So in a perfect world, you want to be on all platforms. I know it takes a lot of time to do that, but definitely try your best, and especially when it comes to short form videos.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is a lot of people think short form video, like you got to be super dynamic and you got to do some funky dance or something. That's not true. We are writing short form video scripts for some of our clients. If anyone wants to see an example, just send me an email at chris@realaccess.com. I'll send you an example. It's very easy, very straightforward. Obviously, if you do have that kind of personality, go for it. But most of us aren't really willing to put ourselves out there like that.
So true. Moving on to number 3, the number of touch points needed to close a deal is increasing. Chris, I know you have a lot of experience when it comes to sales. So I know years ago, HubSpot said it was 8 touch points, but we're seeing almost double that today.
Yeah, I mean, if you Google this, like people are saying it's 20, 30 touch points. I get the net of it is that the sales funnel is truly a funnel at the end of the day, and it takes a lot of work to get someone from, let's just call it top of the funnel, to a sales qualified lead or an opportunity. And you can't expect to do that in very quickly, right? And so those touch points, it's really important to figure out how to automate as much of those touch points as possible. So let's just pick a number, 15. Let's say we all agree 15 touch points is what it takes to bring someone from kind of like somewhat interested into an opportunity. Well, maybe 3 or 5 of those touch points are actually like a salesperson reaching out. Automate the rest, do it through your marketing tools, through email, and just make sure that you're constantly staying in front of them with valuable content. A valuable piece of content could be the short video you just created. It could be a blog post that you have. It could be inviting them to the next whiskey tasting event. But you got to make sure that you're constantly sending out them information, but you got to automate it, because if you don't automate it, it's not gonna be scalable for you.
And I want to add into, when it comes to MDF here, we're going to talk a little bit more about vendor and visibility later on in another trend. But when we think about MDF, this is something that the vendor wants to see too. So when you submit a project, or when you submit your proof of performance, showing them that you actually have developed a nurture strategy and a plan, rather than just like the first step, they will more likely invest more dollars in you and your campaign.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. Like, so when I was at an MSSP, and I started in my career, I was much younger at the time. I was cold calling people or emailing people saying, hey, I want to talk to you about, some IT projects, or if I had something more specific, I would get more specific. And that's how I started. It's embarrassing to say that that's what I did. But over time, as I got a little more confident in understanding what I was doing, I changed my content to really focus on the education side. So I learned really quickly, getting the door shut on me, that this constant pushing of like just trying to find an opportunity to talk to somebody, was I switched it to like, let me educate them. And so I started telling them exactly how we do what we do, right? I didn't leave that for the one-on-one conversation. I was sending that in the emails, and then that actually produced a lot of trust on those emails. And then ultimately I was able to bring in a lot more leads for myself, because I took a different approach. I was like, I'm just constantly try to provide value in every message that I send out, versus the opposite, which I was doing before, which was being selfish to myself, saying, I just want to get an appointment, right? And that fundamental switch is something that I think is extremely important, especially in this day and age, where, email is very noisy at this point. Really focus on educating them. And if you're good, like entertaining. So I know like some of the people doing this that are, very technical in nature, they'll kind of wrap a little humor around that along the way.
So provide value, and also the variety of strategies, obviously, like you said, email, social, direct mail. Don't just do one. Newsletter are a preferred content format. I know what a lot of you people are thinking probably, but newsletters, they're not boring anymore. There are actually companies out there that are built specifically on newsletter and sold for millions of dollars. I'm sure you've heard of the Morning Brew, sold to Business Insider for 75 million, and the Hustle sold to HubSpot for 17 million, 17.2, I think. So they're not boring anymore. It's the type of content distribution that has ultimately replaced, obviously, newspaper and magazines. So we're seeing that email newsletters, there are now the most popular form of content marketing and one of the best ways to nurture leads, but they got to be done right.
Yeah. The facts about the Morning Brew and HubSpot, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that people are building businesses strictly on just sending out newsletters. And the way a lot of these companies are monetizing them, you'd be blown away with how they're monetizing them. But the reason why they monetize so well is because they're building the newsletter to increase engagement, right? they're looking for 25% open rates. They have significant click-through rates. The engagement in their newsletters are very high. So it's not like you can just share, XYZ vendor released, this new product. Like, you got to come with an opinion. It's got to be your own, and you got to make it as engaging as possible. I don't think anyone on the call today or any conversation I had, and no one's going to argue the fact that it's probably pretty important to send regular information to my prospects and my customers, right? And that's really what a newsletter is at the very basic level. Now, when you start to get more advanced on the newsletter side, what you're really doing is you're capturing that traffic back to your website, and then you're using that traffic to do remarketing efforts and so on. And so you can really take this newsletter stuff to the next level. For any of you that have marketing automation tools and stuff like that, doing some lead scoring off of the newsletter is a great way to see what people might be interested in the stuff that you're sending them.
Yeah, and some other stats on this, like newsletter subscribers are actually 25 times more likely to convert into paying customers versus Facebook. I found that's very, very interesting. And also tying it back to MDF, a newsletter as a tactic on its own, probably not something that vendors would approve, but as part of a nurture strategy, most definitely. So trend number 5, vendors want more visibility into campaigns. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but the big thing here that we're seeing is that vendors will invest more in you and get behind you if you can show them more of the ROI throughout building the campaign and implementing the campaign, not just when it comes time to submit your proof of performance. So what you need here is the proper reporting mechanism or the technology stack to support what they want to see. And by doing that, by creating these reports ongoing, you can get more and faster investments from the vendor. So whether that's co-op or MDF dollars, but you give them the visibility that they need to actually support your campaign.
Yeah, so we talk with a lot of vendors. We do business with a lot of vendors, and I can tell you that this is the number one thing that they come to us with when they want us to create MDF marketing campaigns for their partners, is that we need visibility. And like the problem with the whiskey tasting events, the golf outings, is that they don't get a lot of visibility in what's happening, right? All the visibility they get is when they show up to the event and how many handshakes they make during that day. And I can tell you that, if for any of the partners that are on the call today, that you've put in a crap ton of work and effort to put that event in place. So when Ann talks about a technology stack, I mean, those of you that might have a HubSpot or a marketing automation tool, this makes it a lot easier for you. If you're good at Google Analytics, obviously that can help, but ultimately not waiting to submit your proof of performance to show them that ROI, right? I've done this. I've been the recipient of millions of dollars of MDF, and a lot of times you're submitting MDF on the last day that it's due before the system shuts down, and that it doesn't give the vendor enough visibility in what's going on. If you show them visibility from the day you start to kick off your campaign, it allows them to get behind what you're doing. But it also, the most important thing is it gets you in the cycle for additional future investments. And that's the key in creating what we're going to talk about a little bit later. The flywheel is to keep these things funded and moving all the time. And that is, you really got to provide the vendor with the right amount of visibility.
Oh, yeah. More vendors. Vendors are getting smarter about their marketing materials. I actually love seeing this trend. I've hosted or I put together a lot of campaigns, MDF funded campaigns, where the vendor would offer what sometimes are called the campaign in a box. So you get everything ready to go. But back before, it was really hard to leverage these in the box materials because there were they were just not good enough, and there was no draw to it. There was nothing in there that was enticing enough for me. And sometimes it required a lot of customization to make it my own and targeted specifically for our customer base. But we're seeing a shift here now. We're seeing that vendors are actually providing a lot more usable marketing materials, and especially promotions that you can take advantage of. And once you do that, there is a significant cost saving to you and your campaign if you do it the right way. Chris, I know you've seen a lot of these promotions where they've taken. Do you have some examples of things that we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of opinion about this, but I think Anne kind of wrapped some of that together. But I do want to focus on these promotions and the offers that that these vendors are putting together. The important piece of this is that there's a lot of money that goes in front of this, and you should be leveraging that. Like, so in the old days of anybody here that sold wireless, every wireless vendor used to do their seed unit program, which was where they would give away their free access point. You know, we did hundreds of these campaigns over the years of these free access points, and they always delivered. They always delivered because the offer was super strong, right? And I think typically, like, if you want to, let's backtrack, I'm going to date myself here, but 5-7 years ago, it was always about like free consultations, free network analysis, stuff like that. I'm not saying that they're not good offers, but they don't convert at a rapid pace. So I'd really look to see what offers they have. I know, I mean, the wireless companies obviously don't have inventory these days to do these seed unit programs, but a lot of them are doing, free software, free use of their softwares or stuff like that. I know, like, free heat maps. We've done actually some programs where there's doing wireless heat mapping. That's done very well. And then there's the giveaway type stuff. Like, so I was on Veeam's website the other day, and I saw that they were giving away these Oculus, Oculus glasses. Like, these are used properly. These are great. Now, anything a vendor gives you, you have to kind of put your own twist on it. So if they're giving away free Oculus glasses, like, how is that going to resonate into your market? And then you got to kind of work out the messaging so that you don't look like you're just regurgitating what the vendor is doing. But there is a lot of money behind these things. And usually that doesn't break into the MDF allocation that they're giving you. And they also love it when they see that you're using stuff that they've spent the time and money to build. Yeah.
And even, I mean, I said before that you had to do a lot of customization, so you still have to make it your own. But the material that I'm seeing today is way easier to customize and put your own twist and tone to it, so it fit your customers. You know your customers best, so you know what kind of words and language you need to use to reach them.
Yeah, the only thing I see that's not working in this area, they're doing a good job building the content. There's some vendors out there that have these partner portals where you can launch programs from. I haven't seen a ton of success with that, just because, like, you'll launch an email campaign using their tool, and just like the land rate of that email is so low. I don't know why, but I do find that, like, pulling those emails off and then using your own email tool, whether that be MailChimp or Constant Contact or HubSpot, whatever it is, you'll get a better result than using theirs. I'm sure there are vendors that have figured that out. Just my personal experience trying to launch those campaigns inside those partner portals, I haven't had a lot of success using the tools that they've had there.
Oh, I've been into many portals, and I don't think I've had success with any. They're difficult.
Yeah.
I would download and run with it. Okay, let's talk about flywheel. So vendors want to invest in existing flywheels. Chris, I'm going to hand this over to you because you've seen a lot of this and some great success when it works well.
Yeah, so a flywheel is basically, it takes a lot of effort to get the flywheel spinning, and then once it's spinning, it takes very little effort to keep it spinning, right? It's costly to do this. And so I think you really need to invest in building your flywheel, and you almost need to invest out of your own pocket, because vendors come and go, their money gets tied up, and it's hard to keep it consistent. But once you get that flywheel going to a vendor saying, listen, this is what for customer acquisition or cross sells, upsells, whatever it is, this is what we do. and just getting them to tap into that is much easier. And they want to get behind that, right? They really want to get behind what's working for you. What I see a lot of times is a vendor says, hey, let's do some marketing together. Let's do some lead gen together. And it's just like, here's 10 grand or here's 5K, whatever the number is. It just lives and dies and it's over, right? So no one really gets the long-term benefit out of that. But if you can go to a vendor and say, I got an existing flywheel and I want you to tap into it. And I'll give you an example. And this is the boring example, is there was a customer we were doing some work for. All they did was boot camp. Like, I know everyone on this call has probably done a boot camp here and there, but they literally committed to it, right? And they were doing boot camps in areas where, most people aren't doing them, like smaller cities and stuff like that. And it became a thing for them. It became a thing. Like, they had no problems filling the rooms. It was their number one lead generation tool. They actually brought in their own trainer when they got it up and running. And then every vendor was basically just buying from them 6 boot camps from them a year, and just saying, here, I want to do 6, 6, 6, 6. And it's, it's boring. It's boring. There's nothing sexy about it. I mean, they had a good emailing recruitment thing that kept people aware of where they were doing boot camps. But that's an example of like a flywheel on something really boring that became very lucrative for a company.
Awesome. Thank you for that. MDF budgets are shrinking, our trend number 8. This is unfortunate, but it is happening and something we're seeing quite a lot of. I've been involved and worked with the MDF for many, many years now. And when I originally started, it was a lot easier, I should say, to obtain MDF dollars. It was an easier process. It was easier, the whole claiming and proof of performance. But now what we're seeing is that MDF budgets it's hard to allocate now because of the ROI standpoint. Like, now some vendors are requiring 10-to-1 or 20-to-1 as far as an ROI investment. So they're pulling back on the budgets, and others are taking that budget away because we can't really live up to that ROI. So they're all shrinking. Chris, some thoughts on this?
So everything is what they'll say proposal based. Like, so in the old days, it was a percentage of your revenue that you generated, right? Then it kind of moved into like, oh, my territory has this amount of MDF to invest. Now they all call proposal based. Basically, they're just saying like, I have the right to say no, just for whatever reason. I don't really care. One other thing that we're seeing on these MDF budgets are shrinking. We're actually seeing some companies have different policies based off of the type of event you're doing, right? So if you're doing a creative, they might reimburse you by 50 to 80%. If you're doing an event, they're going to say we're only going to do 50% reimbursement. It's all over the board. Like, every vendor is all over the board. But the key is to really come to them with a good proposal to stand out. And the other thing is make it simple. At least how you present it to them, how you execute on it. I get it. It's not simple. And if you have the horsepower in-house to do it, that's awesome. If you need someone like us to help you, that's what we're here for. But you want to present your proposal to them in the most simplest way possible. If you have that flywheel to tap into, great. That's probably the best thing that you could have, because they also don't have the resources behind the MDF to really help support you like you might need. They're really going to rely on you for that. So here's an example. The whiskey tasting event. On a standalone, they might not want to do the whiskey tasting event. But if you use the whiskey tasting event as, hey, this is part of the campaign, part of the overall campaign. We're just using the whiskey tasting event as one of our offers or one of our calls to action. They're more inclined to get behind that because it's addressing a bigger audience that they can get some ROI out of, right? So if you're saying, hey, we're going to run this campaign around this vertical in this geographic area, we're going to be doing, these 3 things to pull people over the finish line, which is, one's going to be a whiskey tasting event. One is we're going to do a seed unit program, and the next is we're going to schedule demos or whatever it is, right? They're more inclined to get behind that because it's a more complete strategy.
So basically, Chris, what we're saying, if you implement a lot of the trends that we talked about right now, you can still do the whiskey tasting event, but think about everything that we talked about up until now. We talked about the flywheel, we talked about content, implement all of that around this whiskey tasting event, because we understand that those events are not going to go away, but the vendors keep pushing back on those for the ROI. But if you can do everything else, if you can give them the visibility throughout the campaign and only position the whiskey as the hook, this is what's going to be them, like pull them over the finish line, they're definitely more inclined to support that with MDF dollars.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is like, I get this question a lot, how much should I ask for, right? What you don't want to do is turn this into a profit center for your business, right? It should be there to fuel your business. And the other thing is that if you're going to do a campaign that's solely focused around them or their solution set, you should ask for 100% reimbursement, right? Let them come back to you and say, hey, we can only reimburse X dollars, but I would go back and ask for 100% reimbursement. If you're going to do it co-branded with another vendor, be reasonable, like be very reasonable about what you're asking for. These vendors are very sophisticated. They know how much things cost. And if they start to think that you're using this as a profit center for your business, they don't like that, right? They don't like that. Now, if you're a really large channel partner, that, sometimes it's pay to play, like you've heard that. That's a little bit of a different situation. But the vast majority of partners, they want to use this MDF to fuel their business. Use it in that way.
Yeah. Last trend, if we can flip the slide. Telemarketing doesn't work. So we're seeing that vendors are now, I actually have a lot of experience in this as well. So vendors are constantly bringing new telemarketing firms to the table. And what they do is that they give them a cold list exported from Zoom info, and they have them call straight down that list. And typically they see very little success from that or no success at all. And when everything goes south, they just bring in a new telemarketing firm. That's what we're seeing. And yeah, telemarketing done that way, not going to work. There's an opportunity here but look at telemarketing as a way and a tactic to pull someone over the finish line. Don't use the cold list. That is not going to work. And the problem is not the person who's calling on this list. The problem is typically who they're calling.
Yeah. So when I was on the VAR side and on the distributor side, we had worked with dozens of telemarketing companies, right? And basically these telemarketing companies spin up. You get a couple good telemarketers in there. They start their own company. They're hot, and then they grow to a size where they got to start adding people to their team, and then the quality goes down, and then they go away. We, as an agency, we have tried for years to avoid adding telemarketing to our service because that's the way that market is, and we don't want to compete at that level. But this year we actually first brought on our first telemarketer, but we did it in a very different way. And this is what Anne's really talking about. This is what works, and I can stand behind this day in and day out. Leads being generated are always good leads. When they get handed off, they turn into bad leads. Everyone's been on the receiving end of this. They say, hey, the leads suck, right? And I can tell you, both parties are doing their best to make those things work. It's in that handoff. It's solely in that handoff is where all the ROI in this campaign falls to shit. Sorry for swearing, but that's what ends up happening, right? It's from when the leads are developed to when a rep can get involved. So I'll tell you exactly how we do the campaign that we're doing right now. It's so basic, and it works day in and day out, right? It is emails going out. We have a methodology that says, hey, if they click on the links in the email, like we're going to give them points. And then at some point level, we call them. So we don't just call everyone on the list. And who's going into these lists? Content syndication leads, form fills, I hate to say it, Zoom info lists are going into these lists. And we're just getting them into an email campaign. and then we're calling them when they hit a certain amount of what us marketers call intent, right? Which is really like, how did they visit a web page on our website? Did they click on a link on these emails? Like it's not that fancy. Ideally, what I'd like to have is a whole digital marketing strategy, social strategy around that. In this circumstance, there wasn't enough budget to do that, so we're literally just following up on email metrics, really, and that's how that works. But what we did is we really focused on, obviously the content's super important, but we really focused on when they hit that certain score to when we made that first phone call. We dialed that in super tight. And that's what, honestly, in my opinion, that's what's made this thing work really, really well, right? So I think this trend is being beat down because of the way people are doing it, right? And we're not a telemarketing agency, so it's also not an area that I want to grow significantly because it's very challenging to scale, but it does work when you do it right. Yeah. The last thing here is these are in the red box here, ringless voicemail and cold email are a great way to round out telemarketing campaigns. So the reality of it is when people are telemarketing, they're making crap loads of phone calls and getting a crap load of voicemails, right? You can mass send voicemails. Just Google ringless voicemails. It's super cheap. You record one voicemail, you send it to a list, and it drops them right into their cell phone. So like you've gotten these before, where you get a ring on your phone, and before you can answer it, it goes away, and then 30 seconds later, a voicemail shows up. That's ringless voicemail. It's very scalable. It's very cheap. And obviously you don't personalize it, but you record like, hey, I was just following up on the email I just sent you, and then the next thing is cold email. So cold email is very different than mass emailing. Cold email is where you use a cold email tool, Outreach.io, Mailshake, SalesLoft, or some of the names out there, Reply.io, Apollo, and they land 100% of the emails will land in the inbox. Well, it's not really 100%, but a high percentage will land in their inbox. It's also a great way to have a touch point in there before you do telemarketing. So those two tools are a great way to get someone in that is doing like outbound prospecting in your organization. Give them something that helps them scale.
Thank you. So 9 trends. We almost did it in 30 minutes, Chris. I did not go into labor. So we're good. Thank God, not right now.
Yeah, I see there's a couple questions. I don't know if we can get to all of them, but
yeah, so we're gonna jump into some questions. Let's start. What sort of data should you capture when recruiting for an event? Well, at a very basic level, you need to, when it comes to MDF, I just want to say that too, like if it's MDF funded, make sure that you capture what is required once you get to the proof of performance. But Chris, I'll let you answer what we recommend as far as the opportunity here to take.
Yeah, so the MDF tools are not really designed to really show the work that you put forth. So as Ann said, you got to obviously capture what they want, which is usually like the invites, the registration page, who registered, who attended. Like that's generally what they want. They want to see their logo, all that kind of stuff. What I will show them is, hey, here's like the actual assets, like show them all the assets that you build around it. And then you want to show them the metrics that go to support it. And then you want to give them a couple talking points that they can go back to their directors and stuff to go and fight for you for more. And so the metrics that I would say are important are, you want to really show them all of the efforts you did around recruitment. Like here was the target market we went after. Let's say you had a list of 2,000 people. We went after these 2,000 people. 10% of them actually engaged in the campaign, meaning they were looking at the landing page. They maybe there was a video you associated with that. They watched these videos. Like we had people engaged. A smaller percentage of that registered, and here from there in attended. Just show them that waterfall, right? And then the talking points is you want to give them a talking point on the top of the funnel efforts. Like here's what we learned, here's what was really good about it. is that people are actually interested, but they couldn't attend the event. And then a couple talking points about results that happened out of the event, right? We brought so-and-so actually scheduled a meeting with your, regional sales director with this prospect. Like, they just want to see some talking points so that they can go back and obviously, honestly, they want to look good. Like at the end of the day, they want to look that they invested in your company and they look good out of it. I mean, selfishly, that's what they want out of it.
I think we have time for another one here too. Let's see, we got one new one. My company won't allow us to share customer partner data with our suppliers OEM for MDF. We can only share company name and title, but no person's name or contact information. How do you get around that for ROI?
That can be a tough one.
Yeah.
If you're in that situation. Well, no, number one, I would go, that's an interesting question. So number one, I would go fight for your vendor inside your company to try to see what the company owner would be comfortable doing. And then the flip side of that is that on the metrics side of what you would show from an ROI standpoint, you don't need to show, like if you're targeting 2,000 people, you don't need to show them all to 2,000 people. You just say, hey, we targeted 2,000 people, right? And then hopefully you can share the results of what actually spit out more at the mid to bottom of the funnel, because theoretically that's what you should be working with that vendor on, right? So that's got to be at a personal level. But I guess like I would need to better understand like where at what point do you actually allow that customer, because at some point if the deal comes out of it, like they got to know about it, right? So there is an inflection point where you're allowed to do that. So I guess my point is that keep it anonymous at the top of the funnel efforts, give them more specifics at the mid to bottom funnel efforts, and then go fight inside your company for your vendor so that they can get what they want. And that's kind of where your role is too, is to really increase that partnership and make it better. Sometimes you got to go back to the owners of your business and say, these are the reasons why we need to do this.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more quick question. What's an example you've seen of small budget MDF campaign that really stood out, was creative? I feel content here. Like anything you can repurpose.
Well, they're all like, when you say small budget, I'm guessing you're saying like the sub $5,000 investments.
That's what I would think when it's small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you have an existing flywheel that they can tap into, usually they can get in for that dollar amount, right? So one thing that I'd probably recommend that at some point, if you have a strong voice and you really want to position yourself as a thought leader, like obviously everyone's doing podcasts, right? Get them to sponsor a podcast with you. That's something that you could charge them for. And also use that money to help obviously cover the cost of your podcast, but also help promote your podcast, right? So how are you going to promote your podcast? Because you're doing that. The other thing is that if your website has a significant amount of traffic already, so there are partners that maybe didn't even try, but actually get organic leads out of their website, then you can get. I would ask the partner, say, hey, we want to start trying to direct some of this website traffic to you, and create a blog post, an article, a solutions page on your website. It's not, I would say we do have really good examples of partners that get really good organic traffic. But that is like an SEO thing. If you don't have a lot of traffic and then going to a vendor saying, hey, I want to do this. And if that vendor does any research, they'll know that your website gets zero traffic. I'd probably stay away from it. But those tend to be a lower dollar amount. And then the other thing is that if you have a newsletter, let's say your newsletter is going and it's going to your customers and prospects, you've built it up to 1,000 people highly engaged in your newsletter, you can get them to get some dedicated content on your newsletter for a low dollar amount. There's a lot of different things you can do here. and then also, if you're going to do it on your own, like if you're not going to use outside agencies like ourselves, then obviously that opens up much greater, right? But from our standpoint, this is what we're seeing, stuff that we're being hired to do.
Yep. I know we're coming up on time here at the 45-minute mark. We still have a few more questions. I'll make sure to follow up with you in an email afterwards. And I also got a question if we will share this recording. Absolutely. We'll send this out after. If you have any questions on anything that we talked about, or if you need some help, support, guidance, feel free to reach out to Chris or myself at any point. We'd be happy to help with that. That would be all. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending.